Chapter 1. Pangu Town is an ordinary member among the myriad small towns governed by the Qinji sect. The Qinji sect is a genuine righteous sect with a long-standing history and a well-established system, ensuring that its subjects live without want. One could say that they are truly fortunate. Indeed, this kind of life is rather splendid. A remarkably handsome youth lounged on a green stone in the back mountains of the Yi family, relishing the mountain breeze while gazing at the azure sky peeking through the gaps in the leaves, murmuring to himself. However, such sentiments are akin to proclaiming, "From tomorrow onward, I shall be a happy person," a declaration typically uttered only by those who are discontented and unfulfilled. When a weary soul from earth escapes the burdens of life and discovers a world where one can wield a sword, traverse the horizons, vanquish demons, and cultivate immortality. How could one not be tempted? Nevertheless, as a transmigrator, the young Ifan possesses his own peculiarities. His consciousness can delve into the Primordial realm, a single-player game he fortuitously acquired prior to his transmigration. Yet, it has been 16 years. Within this Primordial realm, he remains merely a blade of grass, devoid of joy, and seemingly devoid of any benefits for his cultivation. Sigh, perhaps my transmigration has rendered my life too blissful. Ifan lamented inwardly, feeling that his golden finger was rather lackluster. However, when he thought of his living parents, his benevolent grandparents, his beloved elder brothers, and his adorable younger sister, he swiftly realized his own greed. This idyllic life was, after all, a dream he had cherished before his crossing. As the gentle breeze caressed him, rustling the leaves, Ifan gradually closed his eyes. He was not falling asleep, rather, he was entering the Primordial realm. What is happening over there? This time, as Ifan ventured into the Primordial realm, he sensed something unusual. The dim, ethereal expanse of the Primordial realm seemed to be undergoing some momentous event. "Little stone, do you feel that? Over there, it feels as if there is a tremendous surge of energy," Ifan remarked to the brown stone beside him. "That, Father, you have finally awakened again. You cannot imagine how fierce the battles have been over there in the past 10,000 years. It seems they're nearing their conclusion." The brown stone communicated with Ifan. Father, should we go take a look? The stubborn stone was also quite curious about the situation, but dared not venture forth alone, especially without Ifan's approval. In the Primordial realm, Ifan was merely a blade of grass, and moving was laborious and somewhat painful. Furthermore, upon entering this vast and nebulous realm, he discovered that shifting positions was purely an exercise in torment. Thus he refrained from moving altogether. Now, upon hearing the little stone's words, he resolved to shift his position slightly. Thus, a blade of grass and a stone made their way toward the source of the extraordinary energy fluctuations. This peculiar duo actually traveled at a remarkable speed, and since their destination was not very far, they would arrive in just a few years. Along the way, Ifan gleaned insights about the changes in the Primordial realm from the little stone. Simultaneously, this realization solidified Ifan's understanding that the disparity between his time in the Primordial realm and the temporal flow of the real world was gradually diminishing, albeit in an erratic manner. Perhaps this is the design of the game, to allow players to initially experience the rapid passage of time upon entering the Primordial realm, only to gradually delve into the narrative, leading to a slower temporal progression. Yet, how significantly does this Primordial realm differ from the one depicted in the novels I am familiar with? What assistance can I truly derive from it? Ifan pondered. Ifan still held a glimmer of hope regarding this Primordial realm, for it felt strikingly authentic. It was so real that he did not feel as though he were merely playing a game, but rather had traversed into another world. However, he was not human at present, rendering him incapable of utilizing this temporal disparity for cultivation. Of course, this grass form of his was perpetually engaged in cultivation within the Primordial realm. Yet, Ifan found it perplexing and was unable to harness it consciously. It was akin to the photosynthesis of plants or the basic biological functions of animals. That was the innate gift of the body. It did not imply that one fully comprehended and mastered such a skill. Therefore, it was reasonable that Ifan's earlier attempts to cultivate using the techniques acquired in the real world through his grass form would prove ineffective. It was not to say that one could definitively ascertain that the Primordial realm had no influence on reality. Well, this was Ifan's self-consolation and his sole hope for transcending in cultivation. "I hope this transformation in the Primordial realm will bring forth a miracle," Ifan silently prayed as he and Little Stone approached the area of anomalous energy. In that instant, Ifan felt an inexplicable connection, as if summoned by some unseen force. With excitement, Ifan rushed into the chaotic, energy-laden expanse alongside Little Stone. "This!" Little Stone exclaimed in astonishment. Yi Fan was equally taken aback. Before him lay a scene of carnage, with rivers of blood and dismembered limbs scattered about, and in the midst of the hazy terrain, enormous fissures marred the ground. At that moment, a heavy sound of breathing resonated nearby. It was an immensely colossal giant, remarkably robust and flawless, yet marred by countless wounds and bearing an expression of profound fatigue, though his eyes shimmered with boundless martial spirit. Could this be Pangu? Yi Fan conjectured wildly. Fellow Taoist, are you here to obstruct me as well? The perfect giant spoke, his voice a true articulation, unlike the telepathic communication between Yi Fan and Little Stone, for they were not human and lacked mouths. Noticing Yi Fan's silence, the magnificent giant furrowed his brow, sensing the formidable energy contained within the grass-like being before him. Though it posed no threat to him in his prime, it was exceedingly perilous in his current state. As for Little Stone, he was of little concern, easily dealt with in a single step. Fellow Taoist, I do not wish to oppose the chaotic beings. I'm merely the perfect giant began, only to be interrupted by Yi Fan. I am willing to assist you, Yi Fan declared. The perfect giant was momentarily perplexed. I am willing to transform into the sword in your hand, perfecting the world you carve, Yi Fan elucidated. Do you truly wish to do so? The perfect giant paused, taken aback by the declaration. That moment, Xiao grew anxious. He resisted the overwhelming pressure emanating from the perfect giant and implored Yi Fan. Father, please do not agree. I sense a great horror is about to descend. Little Stone, I apologize, but this is the very essence of my existence, Yi Fan replied, leaving behind those words before transforming into a blade of grass. The perfect giant, sensing an unfamiliar premonition, stepped forward to grasp the grass sword. The moment of contact, his confidence surged immensely, and he began to strike fiercely with the sword. A powerful tempest of energy erupted, sending Xiao hurtling away. Father, Xiao body cracked. Parts of him even falling away. He was not harmed by the sword's aura, but was deeply wounded by the overwhelming force of causality that resonated from the shattered sword in the perfect giant's grasp. In the mountains behind the Yi family, the handsome youth Yi Fan opened his eyes, a fleeting look of remorse flashing across his face before it transformed into a smile. For he had just encountered the perfect giant in the primordial chaos, who was none other than Pangu, and had activated a previously unseen system. He had even gleaned insights into a certain technique, though its efficacy remained to be tested. However, the mere thought of escaping his grass-bound existence was enough to bring him joy. Yet, the prospect of waiting 300 million years to be reincarnated left Yi Fan feeling somewhat uneasy. Although he had spent 16 years as grass, he had experienced trillions of years in the primordial realm, a relatively insignificant span compared to the impending 300 million years. Yet he feared the drastic fluctuations in the time differential that might ensue. After all, this temporal disparity was gradually diminishing without any discernible pattern. Enough of this thought, he sighed. Even if reincarnation occurs prematurely, it would be of little consequence. As I recall, Nua's creation of humanity transpires only after the calamities of the ferocious beasts, the Dragon Han calamity, and the Tao Magic Saint calamity. In other words, Yi Fan would likely not be reborn as a human in his next life. Yet he was relieved to be rid of his grass form. Perhaps he could even devise techniques suitable for the cultivation of the human race. Alas, that notion was merely a figment of Yi Fan's imagination. Well then, let's give it a try, Yi Fan resolved, rising in preparation to test the technique he had comprehended in the primordial realm. Suddenly, a figure descended from the heavens, draped in white, with a visage as exquisite as jade, and standing upon a jade-green flying sword. The figure descended gracefully like a falling leaf. Such a celestial being. Yi Fan was momentarily mesmerized. Young man, I am Qingyu Zhenren, the 12th peak master of the Qingyu sect. Do you wish to take me as your master? Qingyu Zhenren, Lu Xia, stated directly, without any superfluous words. Upon hearing that cold voice, Yi Fan regained his composure, but the content of the proclamation left him utterly astonished. The Qingyu sect boasted over 100 peak masters, and those within the top 50 were renowned cultivators. Yi Fan had indeed heard of this Qingyu Zhenren. Tales of severing the Yellow Spring Sea with a single strike, entering the Black Earth Demon cave 7 times, and being an unparalleled genius rarely seen in a millennium echoed. In his mind, in summary, this is a figure of remarkable legend. However, how could such an individual take on a mere commoner like me, whose roots are exceptionally weak? Though Yi Fan harbored doubts, he immediately performed the customary bow of apprenticeship, that I am willing to be your disciple. Upon encountering such a monumental opportunity, Fan would not relinquish it due to a moment of uncertainty. Furthermore, he believed that within the thousand mechanism sect's realm, no one would dare to deceive using the name of the esteemed Qingyu Zhenren MM. Qingyu Zhenren replied, his demeanor and tone revealing nothing. Just as Fan pondered whether to voice his doubts, Qingyu Zhenren spoke again. Let's go, I've already spoken to your parents. Should you wish to return home, you may do so at any time. Ah, all right, Fan responded. Qingyu Zhenren acknowledged, then took Fan on his sword as they departed. Fan clutched the hem of Qingyu Zhenren's robes, his gaze steady and expression unchanged. This elicited a slight surprise from Qingyu Zhenren. Well, this is acceptable, what? Fan seemed to catch a murmured phrase from Qingyu Zhenren, uncertainly inquiring. In response, a swift rush of wind accompanied their rapid ascent. Fan's expression tightened, yet he refrained from shouting or succumbing to fear. Is my master testing me? Or does this prodigious master have pressing matters that require my presence? Fortunately, my time in the primordial wilderness has accustomed me to flying otherwise. I might have been utterly terrified, Fan mused silently as he adjusted to Qingyu Zhenren's sudden acceleration. After about an hour or two, Qingyu Zhenren finally came to a halt. Fan dismounted from the sword, taking several deep breaths to steady his pale, wind-beaten countenance. Stay here for now. If anything arises, you may descend the mountain to seek the disciples in charge, Qingyu Zhenren stated before vanishing like light into the horizon. Ah, master. Fan was left in a daze. Surely, I must still be dreaming, he thought, momentarily bewildered by the surreal events that had just transpired. Yet, it was evident that he was not in a dream, alas. This is all rather perplexing, Fan sighed, speaking helplessly. After silently lamenting for a while, he began to survey his surroundings. 3 towering pine trees encircled a small wooden cottage on the scarlet earth, with a pond in front and an array of flowers and grasses nearby. Yet the scene was not chaotic. This place exuded an aura akin to a hidden paradise, the retreat of an immortal. Thus, Fan felt a diminishing fear of the unfamiliar environment. At the very least, he did not resist the prospect of living here. Here, you are now registered. This is your disciple's token, a scarred middle-aged man in red attire said as he tossed a silver token into the hands of the man in white. Thank you, the white-clad man replied, accepting the token with gratitude before turning to leave, vanishing from the deacon hall in the blink of an eye. The group of elderly individuals is indeed quite rigid. How could a genius like Lucia possibly spare the time to meticulously instruct a disciple? Moreover, Lucia shows no regard for their opinions, directly accepting a mediocre disciple of inferior talent. It makes one ponder the uproar this news would cause if it were spread, the scarred middle-aged man lamented. However, such matters would undoubtedly be kept from public knowledge by the sect, known only to the higher echelons and a select few direct disciples. Even those who were aware would treat it as an unspeakable secret. Yet, as one of the parties involved, Fan was entirely oblivious to this situation. Having completed his exploration of the wooden cabin, he expressed his satisfaction. The cabin, nestled beneath 3 towering pines, appeared modest in size, yet was larger than the average villa. Inside, it housed a study filled with various ancient texts and biographies, a music room containing a guqin and a chessboard, and a kitchen for culinary endeavors. Even a latrine was remarkably modern, rivaling the bathrooms of Fan's previous earthly existence. By the way, does a transcendent immortal like my master really need to relieve himself? Fan pondered upon glimpsing the latrine, a question that soon filled him with trepidation and guilt. He quickly dismissed this peculiar thought and began contemplating his future. As Fan meticulously planned his cultivation regimen, he soon realized that descending the mountain might prove impossible. This mountain was indeed formidable, not merely a gentle slope. He feared that with his current cultivation of the second layer of qi refining, survival on the descent was unlikely, especially upon discovering that ferocious beasts roamed the mountainside. Descending the mountain is simply out of the question, Fan sighed, returning to the wooden cabin to practice the techniques he had comprehended in the primordial wilderness. From the very onset, he sensed that despite his thorough understanding, he might struggle to execute the techniques flawlessly. As anticipated, his first attempt ended in failure. Yet, Fan's countenance was one of joy, for this indicated that the primordial realm could indeed influence reality. He persisted in his endeavors, showing remarkable improvement, though his inability to fully manifest the technique rendered it somewhat futile. Nevertheless, Fan remained undeterred at the very least. He had made progress in his practice. Days passed unnoticed, the sun rising and setting, and soon, more than 10 days had elapsed. Fan, seated in the meditation chamber of the wooden cabin, appeared weary and lost, his expression one of despair. For these past days, his master had not visited, nor had anyone come to bestow upon him techniques or elixirs. Even food and daily necessities were lacking, leaving Fan feeling as though he had been abandoned in the depths of the mountains. Fortunately, the pine nuts from the towering pines provided sustenance, preventing him from succumbing to starvation. However, the hardships Fan endured over these days extended beyond mere hunger. The most profound blow was a struggle with the primordial techniques he had attempted to comprehend. This cultivation technique resembles an activity within a software from Fan's previous life on Blue Star, initially providing a swift sense of proximity to one's goals. However, as time progresses, the journey grows increasingly sluggish, leaving one tantalizingly close yet perpetually out of reach, evoking the sentiment that with just a bit more effort and perseverance, success is within grasp. Yet, that seemingly small distance feels insurmountable, akin to a billion minuscule hurdles, rendering completion utterly impossible. Fan recognized this as an insidious trap, and he felt a deep sense of grievance and melancholy, yearning to return to the days of effortless comfort and ease. Cultivating immortality? He dismissed such notions with disdain. Despite his longing for home, Fan refrained from taking any action. Firstly, the prior difficulties of descending the mountain remained unresolved. Attempting to do so now would be tantamount to courting death. Thus, when faced with the painful choice between a lingering existence and immediate demise, Fan opted for survival. Secondly, he remained oblivious to the fact that his master, the esteemed Qingyu Zhenren, had taken him on merely to fulfill the sect's disciple recruitment task, selecting an unremarkable townsman with poor aptitude and numerous offspring. Fan clung to an unrealistic hope, believing this was a test of his master's, and thus resolved to wait a little longer.